Investigation of one commuter airline reveals an alarming number of potential safety problems.
Until we have a crash, nothing will change.
Before you get on board, David Bloom talks to pilots who charge their airline puts profits ahead of passenger safety.
Okay, just follow my finger.
He's a young man on a mission to become the world's youngest doctor.
Now comes the...
Here is Stone Phillips.
Good evening. If you're flying this holiday season, you may be avoiding commuter airlines, given all the recent problems, including 2 American Eagle crashes that killed 83 people. Tonight, in part 2 of our investigation, we're going to examine one commuter airline that has not been in the news, has not had any major disasters. But as David Bloom reports, many people we've talked to say it could be just a matter of time.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are now boarding 7047, servicing Torino, boarding at door 4. All confirmed passengers, please.
We've been very lucky. There haven't been any accidents yet.
Instrument clearance beyond Albuquerque, please.
Well, safety has to be number one, and it's not.
Taxi runway 25.
The tactics that Mesa uses lower that level of safety.
These pilots are talking about a commuter airline that's so big, it's becoming almost impossible to avoid. It's called Mesa Airlines, but it flies under different names in different cities. You may have flown Mesa without even knowing it. In San Francisco, Seattle, Denver, and Los Angeles, Mesa is United Express. In Kansas City, Orlando, and Pittsburgh, Mesa is US Air Express. In Phoenix and Columbus, Mesa is America West Express. But in Albuquerque, Mesa is still Mesa, a small airline that grew explosively, purchasing 6 other commuter airlines in 5 years, and now flying in 31 states.
Mesa has maintained profitability throughout each of its expansion periods, a rare feat in the volatile airline industry.
Mesa carries 17,000 people every day, and as Mesa says in this promotional videotape, profits are good, nearly $28 million in 1994. Dateline has spent 6 months speaking to dozens of current and former Mesa pilots and managers and sifting through thousands of pages of government documents. We discovered an airline the FAA says has put passengers on planes unfit to fly, an airline cited for lax maintenance on many occasions, whose employees say safety is often compromised for profits. A few Mesa pilots agreed to talk to us on camera, but because blowing the whistle could mean ending their careers, they requested anonymity.
Is Mesa as concerned about passenger safety as it ought to be?
Is Mesa concerned about passenger safety, period, would be a better question.
It's not on their list of priorities.
Well, if passenger safety is not the top priority, what is?
Corporate earnings.
And people ask me, what do you do different? And I simply comment that I tend to run it as a business rather than an airline.
Larry Risley built Mesa from a single airplane 14 years ago into an industry giant.
You have to look at the record of Mesa Airlines. Mesa Airlines could not have operated for 14 years without ever injuring a passenger in any of our scheduled operations if we didn't operate a safe airline.
It's true Mesa has never lost a passenger, but 3 Mesa pilots have died in 2 crashes in the last 5 years. 30-year-old Tad Fizel was one of them. He trained other Mesa pilots, and last year, while working all night, he and another pilot crashed into Mount Wilson, Colorado at 4:15 in the morning.
One body located, 100 feet from the plane.
According to the National Transportation Safety Board, Mesa reported that Fizel went on duty at 8 a.m. and stayed on duty for 20 hours before his plane crashed. Fizel's family is suing the airline, blaming his grueling schedule for the accident.
He would come in and say, God, I'm so tired, you know. I got 2 hours or 3 hours sleep last night because I had ground school, flight school, and then I had to give check rides.
In this letter to Dateline, Mesa contradicts the NTSB reports, saying Fizel had reported for duty at 8 p.m., not 8 a.m., and worked only 8 hours before the crash, not 20. Mesa says if Fizel had filed a flight plan, as the company requires, this accident would have been avoided, and that Fizel chose to fly back to Mesa headquarters, rather than staying overnight at a local hotel.
To say that it was their choice really is beside the point. They had duties. They expected them to be there. If they wanted their jobs, they have to get into the airplane and fly it back down to Farmington. That's the reality right there.
I'll put it this way. Tad did it for Mesa. He did the work for the Mesa that Mesa gave him.
And Ron Fusel says long hours were not unusual for his son. Once Tad sketched out his schedule in the back of an air sickness bag. 23 hours of work on just 4 hours of scattered sleep.
The pressure from that company caused those men to conduct themselves in a manner that was contrary to their own best interest and safety.
Some pilots call that kind of pressure pilot pushing. They say it can take many forms, including forcing them to fly passengers on planes that need repair, rather than cancel a flight and lose revenue.
It seems to be the Mesa attitude that if you can't do it, there's the door. We'll get somebody else that can. And if you don't think that airplane's safe, there's the door. We got somebody else out there who will step in right behind you and fly the same airplane.
It's not just threats. This pilot says captains who ground their planes for safety reasons have been suspended or demoted.
And then, well, if you want your job back, this is the way we do things here.
And that is?
Our way. The Mesa way.
Meaning safety is not a top priority.
Meaning just keep those airplanes moving.
At Mesa Airlines, we're not going to accept any compromise to safety. Our whole focus is on safety.
But this pilot, who works for the Mesa-owned airline Florida Gulf, says he's witnessed not only safety violations, but also a deliberate cover-up.
I've seen maintenance training forms filled out fraudulently. And so instead of going ahead and doing the training as it should have been done, they just filled in the squares in order to save the time and money. And I have asked questions of maintenance personnel, and they said that's the way it is routinely done.
There was a pilot, a Florida Gulf pilot, a Mesa subsidiary who we spoke with, who claims that he personally witnessed documents being falsified.
David, that's not true within the organization.
But Federal Aviation Administration documents reveal a dramatic example of falsified records. In 1992, a Mesa carrier installed unapproved ball bearings in many of its planes, bearings costing as little as $13 instead of the approved $125 bearings. And the FAA found Mesa falsified the repair records repeatedly for 9 months. The cover-up unraveled when a bearing failed in flight. The engine shut down, and the plane had to make an emergency landing.
How do you explain that happening?
David, we did have a circumstance that we had an employee that failed to comply with company regulations as well as FAA regulations. At the time that we found out about it, we fired that employee.
The FAA found it was 3 employees, including a top manager who bragged the government was too stupid to find out. Mesa eventually fired all 3 men and paid a $50,000 fine. But was this an isolated case? To answer that question, Dateline analyzed government databases and poured over thousands of pages of government documents. This FAA database, for example, shows Mesa experienced more than 90 in-flight mechanical problems over a recent 2-year period. Problems the FAA says are frequently related to accidents. 13 times engines failed in flights, second only to the much larger commuter airline, American Eagle.
I've had mechanics tell me stuff that's absolutely wrong, but they're under the pressure to keep the airplane moving too. And boom, the engine quits. Surprise.
And last year, when the FAA examined potential safety problems at 38 commuters, it found 2 Mesa carriers were among the 5 worst.
I can't confirm that comment, and I'm not ready at this time to accept that. I have to say that's the first time I've ever heard a comment relative to that.
But FAA documents show West Air, Mesa's United Express operation out of San Francisco, had numerous citations, including poor maintenance procedures and severe engine oil leaks. And Mesa Airlines, the flagship carrier based in New Mexico, was cited for, among other things, oil leaks and problems with de-icing systems.
If somebody crashed, they wouldn't like it. But as long as everything keeps going status quo, that's fine. Until we have a crash, nothing will change.
And this year, the FAA turned up more problems. Spot inspections of 25 planes in the Mesa system found 7 with safety problems, some potentially serious, like leaking fuel and leaking oil. In one instance, a dented landing gear door and loose de-icing equipment on a plane that had just been cleared to fly by Mesa.
The FAA inspects a plane that has just been certified as safe and top-notch by Mesa Airlines, and they find safety problems with it. And this is March of '94.
David, we work very closely with the FAA. We encourage their surveillance of the airline. It enhances the safety of the airline. The more people that can look at the product, the more likely the product is to be safer.
After our interview, Mesa sent us these letters taking issue with the FAA findings, claiming 2 of the planes were still in maintenance and that the problems did not compromise airworthiness.
There has never been an intent from the management of Mesa Airlines to operate any aircraft that's not totally safe for carrying the passengers that we derive our business from.
But at some point, isn't the airline itself responsible for the actions in so many different cases?
Mesa Airlines accepts full responsibility for the safety of its aircraft, for the safety for its employees, and for the safety of the passengers that we carry.
When you have an airline pushing on the mechanics, pushing on the pilots, pushing the system, you're getting close to the point where something's going to break. And unfortunately, when something breaks at 20,000 feet in the air, you may end up with a lot of dead people.
Congressman Peter DeFazio is on the House Aviation Subcommittee, which oversees commuter airline safety.
The reports the FAA has come up with about insufficiency of maintenance at Mesa are certainly of concern to me, and I think they're being concerned to anybody who read those reports.
In fact, those reports prompted the FAA to consider fining Mesa $315,000. The agency would not comment on the pending fines against Mesa, but critics say the FAA is not tough enough about enforcing such fines against the commuter industry. And when Dateline analyzed this FAA database, we discovered that over the past 5 years, the FAA reduced fines against all commuters by 88%.
Our research shows that for every $100 that the FAA fines a commuter airline, they actually collect $12. That doesn't seem to have much teeth.
I think the FAA does have teeth. We do surveillance. If we find something that shows us that there isn't full compliance with the regulations or company procedures, we take action. And I really can't comment on, in terms of the fines that are suggested and what the final settlement is.
They should just say, you violated the rules, you flew planes that weren't safe, and here's some hefty fines, and you're going to pay them.
And instead today, what's
Today
happening?
it's, you violated the rules. You were bad, but we're just going to give you this little fine. And don't do it again, please.
I would ensure to our passengers that are traveling on our airplanes that we are dedicated to ensuring, as we have always ensured, that they're going to be flying on the safest possible airline that we can make it.
What Mesa would say is the proof is in the pudding. We don't have fatal passenger crashes. And if it's as bad as you say, we would.
Mesa hasn't been around that long.
You're saying they've been lucky?
I'm saying that continued on this rate, at this, the way of operation, that it will happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
And just last month...
Glad to be the man's